like I'm looking at my phone when we first started. It's just because I'm sharing it out. Welcome to another edition of Paranormal New Normal, the second one tonight. You lucky watchers. But I am very excited to have my guest here tonight. I found him on Facebook, and when I saw the book he wrote, I had to find out more about it. My guest tonight is Vincent Field, and he wrote a book called Astral Projection and Lucid Dreaming. And he is a mentor in those two topics, and we're going to find out all about those two topics tonight. Vincent, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, thanks. How about you?
I can't complain. I get to do two podcasts in one night, and I love podcasting, so that to me is a win.
Nice.
So the first question I ask every guest in this show is, what got you into the paranormal, spiritual, whatever you want to call it, world?
Well, it seemed like I had a natural inclination to that kind of stuff. From an early age, I was always interested in, paranormal, fringe, um, mystical, spiritual topics, and that's what got me into astral projection and lucid dreaming. I used to research all this stuff on the internet, back when I was 12, 13, 14. 14 is when I started astral projecting. And yeah, I came across a website one day talking about out of body experiences. And that was my first time hearing about that. And I thought it was so cool. I wanted to try. I wanted to do it. So I found a technique and I tried every day. And in less than a week, I was able to have my first out of body experience. And I've been doing that ever since.
That's that's what's up. I mean, so was it? Did you ever get into like the cryptid side of things when you were younger too? Like all the Bigfoot documentaries and stuff when we were kids, and Loch Ness and all that.
Oh yeah, sure. That stuff, aliens, all of it. I was really fascinated by all of it.
Of course. Well, I mean, I don't blame you because that's what got me into this world as well, and all the little books they had in the school library when I was in elementary school about Bigfoot. But so, what inspired you to write your book? Like, I mean, obviously you're into this stuff, but did you just want to write about your experiences, or were you trying to explain to other people how to do this?
Yeah, a little bit of both. Since I started my practice, I had always shared my experiences, like with certain groups and communities on the internet, forums, and uh, I just loved talking about it. I loved, hearing about other people's experiences and sharing and getting feedback, and also teaching and giving people pointers. They would want to do it themselves, and I'd share my own experience with different techniques and what worked best for me. And yeah, eventually I just arrived at the conclusion that it's time to share this with a larger audience, larger than these relatively small online groups. And I thought, a book was the best way to do it. And so, yeah, I mean, I really had the majority of the book already written because from the very beginning of my practice, I kept detailed journals of all my experiences. So it was essentially a matter of organizing all of this content that I already had for my journals. And so I chose some of the more profound experiences or, the more fascinating or experiences that, kind of served as some kind of learning tool, for the reader to help understand certain concepts related to these experiences. And so, yeah, I organized some of my experiences from my journals. And I also included the techniques that I've used to induce these altered states of consciousness, uh, because I didn't just want to share my experiences, but I wanted people to, to learn how to do it themselves. And aside from those two things, I also provided uh, my own perspective and understanding of these events, these experiences after, about 2 decades of having these experiences. So for example, like in the very beginning, I was having some wild experiences out of my body, but I didn't quite understand everything about them. What exactly was going on? Why would this happen? Why would that happen? And so, after so many years of experience, you start to understand these things. You start to get a better idea of the nature of these experiences, why they happen, what's going on. And so I share that perspective too, kind of to give the reader a better understanding of these experiences that I am sharing.
Well, what I guess the first question I have is astral projection and lucid dreaming, are they kind of the same thing or are there differences between the two?
They're similar, but there are differences. Essentially, a lucid dream is quite simply becoming lucid in a dream. So you're dreaming and you gain full conscious awareness. So you're just as awake, as we are right now talking, but you're in a dream. And in a lucid dream, the same as a dream. Well, this experience, the environment, the reality, the scenario that's taking place, these are generated by the subconscious mind. And with an astral projection, these take place in dimensions of reality that are um, essentially objective levels of reality, like this physical world. It's not subjective, it's objective. It exists whether you believe it or not. It's not being created by your subconscious mind. And so that's the main difference between these experiences. They're both a type of out of body experience. You experience your consciousness in another level of reality. But so typically, lucid dream is more of a subjective type of reality and experience, whereas astral projection is more of a consensus level of reality. So you can go there and meet people and entities that actually exist in these other dimensions.
Interesting. Interesting. And I mean, I've had guests in the show before and we talked about this where a lot of people believe that like Bigfoot and dogmen and all these other cryptids are ultra terrestrial, which basically means they come from other dimensions. And even aliens, people believe that that's how they travel to Earth is they go through different dimensions to get here, which I don't know if I agree with all that, but it is a very popular theory out there. And are those the type of creatures you're talking about, or is it just different spirits and like heavenly underworld type beings?
Uh, well, I've had many experiences with aliens in the astral dimensions. Different kinds of aliens. Particularly one particular group, which seemed to have some kind of interest in me. But other types of beings too that I call them alien just because they have the typical alien appearance. Like the big triangular shaped head and the big black slanted eyes, the skinny bodies, and so these aliens, they definitely exist in these higher dimensions. Now, whether they kind of travel between the physical and the astral dimension, or if they only exist in these higher dimensions, I'm not sure about that because I don't have any physical encounters that I can recall with them. But they definitely exist in these other dimensions and they operate there. And yeah, I've had more experiences with them that I can count, and they're in a lot of them are in my book.
Interesting. And are these encounters usually platonic, or are they? I mean, are these creatures aggressive, or I mean, how does it usually go generally? I mean, I don't want you to give away too much because I want people to read your book, but
Well, it depends on the particular group of entities that I'm dealing with. Um, I've had a lot of encounters with a group that don't appear to have the best intentions. I've had some really frightening experiences with them, but I have experiences with other groups who are just the opposite. It's like they're like higher level beings, like intelligent and wise and like loving. And I've had some incredible experiences where they share these insights and revelations to me that are really like mind blowing. So, there are both sides to it.
Which makes sense because I mean it's like humans. You can meet good humans, you can be bad. You can meet bad humans. I mean, it's just every. It would make sense that every society would have the good and the bad. I mean, there's always yin and yang and everything. So,
Right.
except for the reptilian supposedly, but I don't know if I believe that either. But so, have you run into any of the typical two, which I just mentioned one, but like the Greys or the reptilians? Like, have you run into them at all? Or
Yeah, I've encountered so many different beings. The typical ones that people commonly report, and others too. Some that I've like you don't even have like a concept for. They're just so far out there, and it's not all just like aliens. Like there are types of like spiritual beings, like higher level. Like they almost look like angels, and some of them are like massive, like hundreds of feet tall. It's really like beyond words. Some of the entities that exist out there, and like I said, some of them um, are nasty, malicious, and others are benevolent. And yeah, and what you said is is exactly what I say. It's just like this physical world. You have the good side and the bad side, and this carries over into these higher dimensions too. It's no different. So you get people every now and then who say, "Oh, demons don't exist. Negative entities don't exist if you don't believe in them." And that's under the assumption that what you experience is only what you believe. But of course, that's not the case, right? And
yeah,
so,
I mean, if these things exist, they exist. It's not going to be based on what you believe. I have a hard time believing that theory, for lack of a better
right,
word. I have a hard time finding logic in that theory. That's the best way to put it. I have a hard time finding logic in a theory that, oh, if you don't believe it's not there, it's not there. I mean, that's what we tell kids when we talk about like the boogeyman, stuff like that. Like, if you don't believe he's there, he's not there. Like, no, if something's there, it's most likely there. I mean, these things have been seen because they have to exist somewhere. And whether it's in our world or another dimension, they're going to exist somewhere, which I fully believe. And
yeah, and
interdimensional makes sense. I mean, the whole Rick and Morty of it makes sense. Like 100% it does. So
sure.
to lucid dream, what is the best way for people to like? What's the best way people can do that in a way they'd understand? Like, I know it's more complicated than you could. I mean, I know it's hard to put simple because it's a complicated thing to actually lucid dream. It takes practice, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, well, in general, it takes a degree of um, consciousness development, the development of your consciousness, your awareness, your ability um, to recognize your current state of consciousness and the nature of the reality around you, right? So common techniques for lucid dreaming typically involve a kind of practice during your normal daily life. For example, reality checks. So maybe every time you happen to glance at your hands throughout the day, you do a reality check. You ask yourself, am I dreaming or am I awake? And what happens is, if you do this enough, it starts to carry over into your dreams, and you'll find yourself in a dream looking at your hands, and then almost as a second nature, you ask yourself, "Am I dreaming or awake?" And then you realize you're in a dream, and that's when it becomes a lucid dream. You realize you're dreaming, and from there, it's pretty incredible. But there are other there are other methods as well. Like before going to sleep, you can do a kind of affirmation meditation. So you enter a meditative state and you repeat affirmations such as I'm aware that I'm dreaming. Like when I'm dreaming, I become lucid, things like that. And the idea here is that you're programming your subconscious mind to trigger lucid awareness once it recognizes that it's in a dream. And so the thing with lucid dreaming and most lucid dream techniques is that they're kind of indirect techniques in the sense that they typically require some kind of subconscious trigger. So it's not like you enter the experience directly. You fall asleep, you're unconscious, and then suddenly you spontaneously gain awareness in this other reality. And one reason that I always favored astral projection, not just because of the more objective nature of it, is that these techniques are direct. So you're awake, you lay down, you do some kind of meditation, and you leave your body directly. So you're not relying on some kind of, self hypnosis that is going to trigger later on in the night.
Which makes sense. I mean, and I've actually heard a lot about astral projection lately because a co-host on another show on called Global Strangeness, she actually took a course in it online during COVID, and she says that it's amazing because like in the same class there'll be like police detectives and stuff like that because they will actually use astral projection to try to help solve crimes, which I find fascinating that the police are actually willing to consider these things these days when, the idea of police going to like a paranormal supernatural realm for this type of stuff was always like a movie thing. It was never like a real life thing until more recently, which
Right. When I hear things like, let me have an out of body experience to solve a crime, or like to find some information regarding the physical world, well, this is actually a common misconception because astral projection, by definition, by the very word astral, takes place in another dimension of reality. So you're not experiencing the physical dimension during these out of body experiences. So, to demand that we have some kind of physical evidence for these experiences, some people will say, well, if it's real, then come to my house and read these numbers that I wrote down on my nightstand. Well, you're not projecting into the physical world. You're in a totally different dimension of reality. And, there are some similarities between the physical dimension and certain astral dimensions, particularly the astral dimensions that are closest to the physical dimension. So you can consider reality like a spectrum of different dimensions, with the physical dimension being the base level. And as you get further down the spectrum, I would say higher along the spectrum, the more these non-physical realities start to deviate from the physical world. Its appearances, the mechanics becomes very different. And so, yeah, in these lower astral dimensions, the environment typically does look a lot like the physical world, but it's still not the physical dimension. So there are issues with trying to, obtain information from the physical world from an astral projection because of that.
which makes sense. And I actually was told by someone else on my show a while ago. I can't remember exactly who it was, but they said there's 10 different dimensions, I believe, and that. I mean, does that number ring a bell to you, or is it like infinite?
Yeah, no, I think, like with all due respect, uh, non-physical reality is so much more vast than just a set number of dimensions. And once you gain a lot of experience, entering these other dimensions and shifting between one dimension and another, you start to realize more and more how complex it actually is. It's not just like different levels, right? it's all interconnected in such more of a complex um, way. So, in my experience and the experience of many others with, you know, um, a lot more experience than me. I have a little over 2 decades of experience, but some with 4 or 5 decades of experience doing this, they agree that uh, there's absolutely no way to count the number of dimensions out there.
Yeah, I would imagine it'd be infinite, and that it probably something that grows all the time. I mean, we're probably dimensions are probably just created out of who. I mean, I don't know how dimensions are created. Even I mean, I'm sure they either have been there since beginning of time altogether, or they're created by maybe there are beings out there who can create dimensions. I don't know. I mean, a Rick Sanchez out there, who knows? But I mean, I wanted to say though, when you did say that there are some dimensions that like are closer to the physical plane, would those almost be, and I hate to keep going back to pop culture, but would those almost be like the upside down in Stranger Things, where like it's close to reality, but it's all twisted a different way? Like it's all like you're seeing things you would see in physical plane, but it looks different and it's got a different feeling to it.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. There's definitely some truth there. Um, and you can encounter dimensions that are almost an exact duplicate of the physical dimension. Maybe like, I don't know, one piece of furniture will be in a different place or something simple like that. But yeah, there are other places that have the general resemblance of the physical world, but there will be some striking differences, and particularly in the lower dimensions. um, Similar to the Stranger Things reference, they typically tend to be inhabited by the more negative types of beings, simply because of the nature of these dimensions. They're lower on the spectrum of non-physical reality. So, the nature, the quality of the energy is lower, and so you typically associate like negative entity, uh, a negative person with like a low level of energy. And the opposite is true with these higher level, like enlightened entities, or um, just good, loving, caring people. They resonate with a higher level, a higher quality of energy, and so that correlates with the higher dimensions. And so, yeah, similar to Stranger Things, you got some nasty entities in the upside down, they call it, and the same goes with the lower astral dimensions.
Which would make sense because I mean, Stranger Things is based on reality to some degree because I mean the Montauk experiments happened, and it was them trying to force kids to do basically astral projection and lucid dreaming and that type of stuff. I mean, and among a bunch of other things that they should never have done to kids. But it's just, and I mean, everything's created. Everything, a lot of things in fiction are created for a reason because somebody somewhere saw something and they wanted to write about it, but they couldn't call it. They couldn't say it's nonfiction because people would usually laugh them off the streets if they try to say like, "Oh, this really exists," but to some degree, it probably does somewhere. I mean, the possibilities are infinite of what could be out there in the other dimensions, especially.
Sure, sure. I also think in movies and television, sometimes it's intentional. Like they introduce a concept through fiction, with the intention of actually having people learn about this concept because they believe it is true. But just to come out and say like this is real, most people won't believe it. But I think like slowly introducing the ideas, like like the UFO phenomenon.
Yeah.
Well, you know, years ago the governments were denying it, and now they're saying, "Oh yeah, it's true," right? And over the years through movies and TV shows, you know, uh, this concept was introduced more and more, and now no one's really even blinking an eye because we've been so exposed to it over the years.
Yeah, I mean, well, and plus, I mean, it was supposed to be a distraction from COVID. That's why they finally announced it. But I mean, people were paying attention because of COVID, and everybody who believed in UFOs all along was just like, told you, told you.
Right,
But I
right.
mean, and plus, I mean, it's everybody knows about Roswell. Everybody knows about uh the one in London, the one in England. I can't think of for some reason. The Rendlesham Forest, I think it's called, like incident, and there's a bunch of examples out there. The Barney and Betty Hill abduction, like all these famous cases have been around forever. Which, if these aliens are from different dimensions, though, I mean, why do you think they suppose? I mean, because it's pretty proven that they take people at certain times. Because there's been plenty of abductees out there who have come forward and said like, this happened to me. I mean, Betty and Barney Hill, Travis Walton, just for some popular examples. But like, why do you think they're doing it?
Well, with my experience, these lower level entities, these aliens that I would consider um, less than benevolent, um, they seem to be very cold, as if you know I am some kind of um, I don't know, lab rat. You can almost call it. Like I've never like really been experimented on in the typical alien abduction scenario, but I I've always gotten this sense that there's this lack of like empathy, and what they're doing is more for like an intellectual purpose on their end, without really any regard for the human perspective. And it is different with these other groups that I've encountered, but um, you know I've done a lot of UFO and alien research over the years. I don't know if you're familiar with Carla Turner, but her,
Sound, sounds familiar.
yeah, um, apparently, I mean, the story is that the government killed her after uh, writing her books and kind of blowing the whistle on what was going on with them. But yeah, there's some really sinister stuff going on with some of these groups, and it ties in with the government. I don't want to go too far into that, but it's interesting. I've always been interested in that kind of stuff, and yeah, you know,
Well, I
who
mean,
knows?
it what I mean, well, I've always believed that. I mean, there's been different stories about the government being involved with aliens for decades now, and I mean, X Files kind of touched on it for a bit, and they did have a. I mean, they took it way out there, but it is kind of right to some degree because I mean, there's the whole Valiant Thor idea that, well, not idea, the Valiant Thor experience that supposedly happened to, I believe it was, I want to say Roosevelt, or not Roosevelt, Eisenhower. It was like supposedly a Norse alien actually came to the White House and stayed in the White House and Pentagon for weeks right after World War II ended, and he was supposedly trying to talk to them all about like how we shouldn't be using nuclear weapons because it's going to lead down a bad road. I mean, there's pictures out there too of him supposedly sitting next to the president when the president was doing like speeches in public and whatnot. But he wasn't what they call a Norse alien, so he looks like someone from Europe. So nobody would have thought anything unless they actually talked to him or got the actual full story. And I believe the president's daughter at the time actually like confirmed it years later that it actually happened. But I mean, people are still skeptical about it. But that's one of my favorite examples of the government messing with aliens. Because I mean, if you have a being who probably is more intelligent than most humans telling you shouldn't do this, I for one would listen. Because, but
Yeah, yeah, definitely, for sure. I mean, there's certainly more advanced than we are.
I will most of them I would say. I mean, I'm sure there's ones out there that are still just just the ones that are probably malevolent are probably out there just destroy, destroy, destroy because they're not intelligent enough to do anything else. I mean,
Right.
who knows? But do you believe that dimensions can be created like tulpas or golems, like out of people's minds? Like, can people create dimensions just by giving enough thought to an idea and like getting other people to believe the same thing?
Yeah, well, that's essentially what happens in a lucid dream. Your subconscious mind essentially creates an entire reality. Um, Now the question is like, is this like an objective level of reality? Can someone else experience this reality? And typically, it's more of a private, subjective dimension of reality. But yeah, there are theories that our thoughts can actually give rise to um, elements which materialize in the astral dimension, and so you can experience this directly during an out of body experience. If you um, put enough thought and concentration, you can manifest things. It's especially easy with your own body. You can change your appearance, the form, your size. It's quite malleable, especially in the higher dimensions. And so, yeah, what I've learned, not just from research, but from my own experience of interacting with people who have died. So they're in these higher dimensions, and they're having their afterlife experience. After we die, we go to these higher dimensions, and you can access these same dimensions during these out of body experiences. You communicate with deceased relatives and friends, during your astral projections. And so there is a level of creative power that is particularly um, present in the higher dimensions, which does allow you to manifest um, essentially an entire world, environments, and it's like it's just generated out of this creative energy that we have within us. And in the lower dimensions, we're typically cut off from this type of energy that allows this manifestation. But as you get higher in the dimensions, you seem to gain a stronger and stronger connection with higher levels of your own consciousness, and also um, God, the source of all of creation, and you can experience this connection, firsthand. There's no doubt about it when you have the experience. I mean, me telling you about it, believe it or not. But so in these higher dimensions, with this stronger connection, with these higher aspects of our own consciousness and the universal consciousness, we do have these powers of manifestation. So, like an entire dimension, um, you know, sure.
So actually, that was gonna be. It's actually funny you mentioned God because that was gonna be one of my follow up questions to this is like is heaven one of these dimensions supposedly or not if you don't want to if people don't want to call it heaven like a divine like dimension like where people actually go supposedly when they die like is that actually out there do you think or did people create that by enough of them believing that it exists?
Yes. So essentially, how it works is that your afterlife experience is largely determined, at least initially, by your prevalent state of consciousness, your prevalent state of psychology, emotional state, um, and how these tend to carry out into your thoughts and beliefs and actions. And so I mentioned something similar about how the quality, the state of your energy will determine, what level of non-physical reality you experience. And so, um, uh, a bad person, let's say, person who is just full of hatred and envy and malice, right? They will be naturally attracted to a low afterlife dimension, um, which also reflects those same qualities and characteristics. And so will everyone else who shares that same state of being, right? And so you'll be in this lower dimension with all these other people who are acting out in hatred and malice, but now they're their own victims. Like in this physical world, typically uh, there are a lot of innocent victims, right?
Of
But so
course.
in these dimensions, you're surrounded with other horrible people just like you. So you're all kind of acting out these brutal instincts upon one another now. And so essentially, um, th- that's a hell because there's no end to it until you're able to change your own state of consciousness, change your ways, right? And a lot of times that's not easy. And the same applies on the other end of the spectrum. So you have these higher heavenly dimensions, where typically if a person is uh, is kind of in touch with with their spirituality, in a sense that they're not overly dogmatic, but they're open minded, and they have these other qualities like compassion and love and empathy, right? Well, typically, they'll find themselves in one of the higher afterlife dimensions, after dying. And, there's everything in between too. So essentially, yeah, there is definitely some validity to the heaven and hell concepts. And I mean, myself, I've personally experienced the whole range of different afterlife realms, the good and the bad. And some heavenly dimensions, uh, you experience a state of bliss and like divine love and a connection, like I said, with God and with all of creation. And it's just beyond words, the beauty and the wonder of existence in these higher levels. So yeah, they definitely exist.
Good to know. Good to know, of course. And which so is there like the theory of reincarnation? Like, is there a dimension where people's spirits are held for spirit souls, whatever you want to call them, their essence? Is there a dimension where that would be held? And do you think reincarnation is possible if someone's still like not able to ascend to the heavenly dimensions because they are not free of mind enough to get there?
Well, what I've discovered through firsthand experience is that the typical idea of reincarnation, of this cyclical process where your body dies and then you're reborn into a new body and that one dies over and over again, that's missing the mark. So we have something called a higher self, and the higher self is essentially the highest level of who we are as spiritual beings, as conscious beings, and who we know ourselves to be right now. These personalities with these names living on Earth, well, we're just a small aspect of a much larger uh, being, a much larger consciousness. And um, with development and experience, you can begin to tap into these higher levels of your own self. And eventually, what I've learned to do is reintegrate with my higher self. And when you do that, you experience the fact that your higher self um, consists of many different personalities, different individuals. So I'm one. There are all these other incarnations, and essentially the higher self is sending out like probes, right? Kind of splitting itself off, having all these different lives, different places on Earth, different points of time, and at the higher level, at the level of the higher self, this is all essentially simultaneous. It's all happening like in just in the moment, because in these higher levels, time doesn't work like it does down in these lower levels, like where we're at now. And so you experience the fact that you are connected with all of these other incarnations, and you are one with them. They're you are them, at the level of the higher self. And we experience this separation at this lower level of our physical body and mind. But um, you you realize that this is essentially what reincarnation is. It's not a reincarnation, but it's more of a simultaneous multiple incarnations. And so it's not like when this body dies, eventually I'll be reborn in another body on Earth. I will continue my journey through higher dimensions without needing to come back onto Earth, because I share the experience of all these other incarnations at this higher level of my own consciousness. And so if you're just being introduced to this concept now, it could seem a little either crazy or hard to wrap your head around. But um, that's been my experience, and it's been confirmed by other explorers too. So yeah, that is my take on reincarnation.
Which I can respect that take. It makes sense. It makes sense to me, at least logically. And I mean, it does explain past lives to some degree as well. So that would make sense. I mean, if we get a sense of our past life, and if part of it's out there, maybe we can connect with it somehow, like when we're sleeping, and when we wake up, it sticks with us, which 100% makes sense to me. 100% does. And so, got kind of a two-part question next. What is your first one? First part is, what is your favorite experience you ever had while lucid dreaming or astral projecting? And then the second part is, what was the most either, I mean, yeah, I'll go either terrifying or horrifying experience you had.
Okay. Well, it's hard to say that I have one like favorite experience. I you know I can choose the first one that comes to mind, and I'll take this from my first book. It was my my first higher level experience, my first astral projection into a higher dimension, a higher astral dimension, and just the the experience is so much different from the lower dimensions. There's no comparison. In these lower dimensions, your perceptions and the environment, it all seems kind of normal, right? Like you do have a slightly heightened state of awareness, but nothing extraordinary. So my first higher level experience was like I was instantly connected with this source of like divine love and bliss. It was just like my entire being was just permeating with bliss. And this bliss and this love, it wasn't just like in me, but it comprised like the entire dimension and like everything. Like I was just connected with all of it. And the environment was just so much different from anything we're used to seeing in the physical world. It was like I describe it as like a sea, like an infinite sea of multicolored energy with these huge, like colorful, like bubbles of energy, and it's just uh, you know something that is beyond words. So me describing it now doesn't give it real justice, but um, you know, it was like an experience of like multi-dimensional perceptions. So what that means is any one particular perception, as we're used to it here in the physical world, was actually experienced in a whole number of various perceptions like simultaneously. So like in this dimension, there was this heavenly music playing. This music just it permeated the entire dimension. It was like an aspect of the dimension, and it was more beautiful than like anything you could ever hear or replicate with some guitar, some instruments here. And and I didn't just hear the music, but like the music, like it manifested like visually as these like abstract, like geometric forms, and and I experienced the music as like an emotion, and so like the colors I was seeing, like I didn't just see them, but like I felt them, and like they manifested in like all these different aspects, sight, sound, feeling, emotion. They all manifested in all these different ways simultaneously. And again, I'm not doing justice to the true experience, but it was just so incredible. And then, I was connected with a higher consciousness, and I knew this higher consciousness, it was my own consciousness, and it was like it was guiding me, and like it was like imparting knowledge to me. And I was flying like through these tunnels, and I flew out of this tunnel into this area that had like this large screen, and I knew it was some kind of technology, and I was shown images on the screen, and like I saw the Earth, and then it zoomed in, and it extracted people that I knew, and it was analyzing these people, and I I knew that this place was designed to observe people on Earth and analyze how they have been spiritually corrupted during their life on Earth. And so it went through all these people that I know, and it was just a very enlightening experience. And more happened after that, but yeah, that my first higher level experience was definitely one that stands out, especially just because it was my first. I mean, I've had experiences after that which blow that out of the water, but I think that's a good one to start with.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds incredible, and not to always bring it back to pop culture again, but you're actually the second person to describe something like that to be on this show. And I mean, well, not he. This person didn't travel to them. After all, he kind of did, but I mean, it reminds me, and he actually was like, yeah, it kind of is like that. It reminds me of in Futurama when Bender's flying through space and he meets God in space, and he's just a cloud of different color lights flashing, kind of like that's what it reminds me of always. Because that, to me, that makes the most logical sense. That if there is I'm agnostic, so I don't admit to believing anything specifically, but if there is a divine being out there, that's the most logical thing it would be to me is just a cloud of gas of that's intelligent and sentient, and it would just look like different lights and whatnot because we can't comprehend what it really looks like. I mean, I can't see a divine being a big chiseled white guy with a beard. Like that just sounds like
Right.
some fantastical writing done by men, but and some paintings done by men. But I mean, so to me that makes sense. That makes sense because if there is something out there, it's not gonna be something we can comprehend with our eyes. We're not meant to know what it looks like. Maybe nothing is.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, what I've come to realize is that anything you experience in these higher levels of reality, well, it's all kind of like filtered through our brain and our mind, which relies on physical concepts that we've learned during this life on Earth, to make sense of it. And so something that's beyond the physical concepts that we know, like we will, like, by definition, have to kind of translate that into something we're familiar with to actually comprehend it in some way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, we have to be able to put meaning to something. It's just human nature. We have to be able to comprehend. We have to be able to like find a way to describe something, which is why a lot of times we experience something and we blame it on we find a way to explain it's not true, which is how a lot of stories get told in life and folklore and all that stuff came to be. But which so what was your most terrifying experience? This is kind of the one I'm dying to hear because I mean, everybody loves a good horror story, kind of. So,
Sure, sure. Um, well, I'll take this experience out of my first book too. I mean, I'm currently writing my second book, um, but I don't want to give anything away from that. So we'll stick
I
with the
don't blame you.
first one. But it's good stuff. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is the last experience that I shared in the book, and this started out as a typical projection. I left my body. I flew through the wall outside, and I was just cruising along. It wasn't a typical lower dimension. It wasn't dark or dreary. It didn't have any kind of like bad vibe to it. It was kind of like a sunny looking day. So I'm flying out, past my house out into the front road, and I hear something calling me, and it's like kind of like this gentle, whispery female type voice calling my name, and I identify where it's coming from. It's coming from my front porch, and it looks like a statue, maybe 4 feet tall, and it's like a statue of a saint, some kind of saint type lady, and it's calling me to it. And so I go over, and it's calling me closer and closer. So I get real close, like face to face, and then all of a sudden, uh, this type of, I don't know, like a beam of energy like shoots out from it, and it hits me in the neck, and it attaches to me, and it's sucking out energy from me, and it's painful. And at that moment, I knew, like, this was all a deception. This isn't a statue. This is some kind of a negative entity, and I'm being attacked. It's sucking energy out of me, like a vampire or something. And I'm trying to pull free. And typically, if you have some kind of a negative experience, it's rather easy to re-enter your body. Anytime you experience like a heightened state of fear, you almost always instantly go back into your body. So, no issues. But this time it was like I was stuck. Like I was trying to break free from it, and I was struggling. And meanwhile, I'm getting this energy sucked out of me, and it's painful. And I just sense this, I don't know if I want to say evil, but I think you get the idea. And and eventually I break free, and I'm back in my body. And the next day, my neck starts to hurt, the same exact spot where this entity attached itself to me. And I develop this tightening in my muscle. It's like a sprain. It's like if you strain your neck, I don't know, in the gym or something. But this was the worst neck strain I'd ever experienced in my life. I couldn't move my head, but not only that, it was so painful that, like, at times I was like on the brink of tears. And so, what's my conclusion? I suffered an actual physical injury from this spiritual attack in another dimension. And yeah, that was pretty frightening. And it also it caused me to kind of like take a step back and like consider like what was actually happening, um, eventually I came to terms with the experience, and I moved on. But when something like that happens, a lot of people say, oh, it's impossible to actually get hurt during these experiences. But on multiple occasions I've actually experienced physical pain resulting from some kind of attack, I would say spiritual attack in the astral dimensions. But this is the first one that was like a legit like injury. Like for days I was suffering.
Well, I mean, I asked for a terrifying story, and you delivered. You delivered. And I mean, not to. And I've heard before. I mean, if you get hurt in dreams, you sometimes get hurt in real life. Like, and that's just the way it is. I mean, I don't know about the whole Freddy Krueger, you die in a dream, you die in real life type thing, but I don't know if that's true. I mean, have you ever experienced anybody that actually had that happen? I mean, maybe that would explain some people that go into comas and they can't explain why.
Well, no, I mean, typically, I don't believe in the idea that, if something happens to you when you're out of your body, like it will result in a physical death. Okay. But here's the thing: when you're out of your body, you occupy a type of energy body or spirit body. And when you go back into your body, this energy body or spirit body, it reintegrates with the physical body. And they essentially become one. And so like right now, um, we have this physical body, but we have like finer layers, which are essentially spirit bodies within the physical body, all kind of merged together, integrated. And so during astral projections, the spirit body uh, temporarily leaves the physical body. And so I suppose it makes sense that if something affects your astral body, it could have an effect on the physical body once it reintegrates with it. And so perhaps that is what happened.
Possibly. I mean, uh, I got one more question, and then I will wrap it up. But I I am a huge fan of a show called Monsters Among Us. It's a podcast, and there's these entities they talk about in that show, and they've never really talked about before that show. But they're called, well, the host of that show calls them mirrored men. And basically, it's three humanoid figures who they usually are wearing like almost like Men in Blackish, like black suits, top hats, and they usually three. They usually walk like in synchronization, like they all wherever the first one makes a movement with, the other ones make a movement with, and they all walk the same. They all make the same. If one looks one direction, they all look the same direction. So what I'm kind of wondering is, have you ever run into anything like that in your travels?
It reminds me of shadow beings, especially when you said three of them that essentially um, like act in unison. I've had an experience, one that particularly comes to mind, with three shadow beings that appear to be almost like duplicates of one another. Now, I mean, the shadow beings seem to be lower dimensional entities that typically are there when you leave your body, especially in the early days, and they seem to just want to scare you. Like maybe they feed off your fear, something like that. Um, Now, exactly what they were talking about on the podcast, I'm not sure. But yeah, that sounds pretty interesting. I'm sure it could be something that maybe you can encounter out of your body.
I mean, yeah, multiple people have supposedly seen these, especially a lot of them when they were kids, and it's usually when they're looking out their window at night or something in like rural areas. But they also have been reported in like people seeing them while they're hiking in the woods and whatnot. So, I mean, one of the possibilities that the host always brings up is that it could be a dimensional slip of some kind, and that these creatures are just not meant to be seen by us because time loss of time does happen when people see them. Like they'll be looking out the window at 10 o'clock at night, and next thing they realize it's 6 o'clock in the morning, and they're still in the same position. So, I mean, it could also be extraterrestrial in origin as well, but that would be interdimensional as well, probably. So it's just figured it maybe you could see maybe you saw something similar, but I mean, my hopes weren't that high because this is a very rare phenomenon that people don't report a lot.
Okay. It does remind me of shadow beings in what you said of them, you know, being seen in the physical world. Maybe there's some kind of dimensional slip. Because, I've only encountered shadow beings, shadow people, out of my body. But there are people who have seen them in the physical world. And, like I said, they exist in the lowest astral dimensions, like that are very, very close, just slightly above the physical dimension. And so I do think there could be some kind of way that sometimes there's kind of a crossing of the dimensions, maybe temporarily, and we're able to either perceive into a slightly higher dimension where these entities exist, or somehow they're able to kind of temporarily come down into ours. It's possible.
I mean, yeah, kind of like how they say the veil is like thin on near Halloween or on full moons, like kind of like that kind of idea where maybe there's times where the veil is just a little bit thinner between dimensions and people see things they aren't supposed to see, and because of that they lose time because their brain's trying to put meaning to it, like put logic to it. So
Sure.
makes sense. And yeah, my wife has actually seen shadow people in the physical sense, so I do believe shadow people exist 100%. I've never seen any being like that, but I haven't seen a lot of things, and so but I still believe in a lot of things. So that's just the way it goes. Those who want to see don't see. But
I've seen things like that, um, at night when it's dark, and I usually just chalk it up to my imagination being overly tired, kind of hallucination. Perhaps these are legit sightings, but who knows?
I mean, my wife's seen them during the day too, so that's the other thing. But
Okay, sure.
she also lived in a house that was built on Native American burial ground, so that could have been something different altogether. Who knows? But there's possibilities are endless. That's why I love the paranormal. Possibilities are endless, and there's a lot of explanation. There could be a lot of explanations for the same thing. But
Right, right.
why don't you tell the listeners though where they can find your books and if they want just where your books are found and just sell yourself basically. Sell anything you want to promote.
All right, for sure. Thanks. Yeah, my book is on Amazon.com. You can find it in paperback, Kindle, audiobook, whatever format you prefer. And you can find me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. My username is Vincent Fields Author, one word. And, I encourage people to get in touch with me if you need any advice, if you want to get into these practices, and, need some tips and tricks. I'd be happy to help you out.
Well, hopefully some people reach out to you because I know astral projection is a big thing right now.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
as all my listeners know, you can find me on Facebook as Paranormal the New Normal / Maniacal Music Musings podcast with the S group. You can find me on Twitter and the Gram as at Juggalo Bastard. You can find me on TikTok as at Juggalo Bastard Podcast. And you can find Paranormal the New Normal on YouTube. Just search the name. All the videos I do will be on YouTube. are on YouTube and they get released the same day as the podcast because you don't get it early. I may be setting up a Patreon soon to do that, but that's not happening just yet. And I would love to thank my guest, Vincent Field, for coming on. I would love that because I mean he has been a great guest, and I learned a lot tonight, and I love it when I learn new things on this show. So thank you for coming on, Vincent, and to all my listeners and watchers, have a good night, and I will see you tomorrow for my watchers and my listeners. I'll see you in half a week.